I'm Morgan Taylor, 32, and until last Friday, I was the top marketing executive at Digital Sphere Incorporated. 7 years of dedication, 3 major promotions, and countless late nights all leading to that moment. It was the annual Marketing Excellence Gala, and I was representing our company, secretly buzzing about my upcoming promotion. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Audrey, my boss. "You're fired. We need fresh blood." My stomach plummeted. I looked up from my phone and locked eyes with Nathan Reed, Audrey's biggest rival, sitting across the table. Before we dive into what happened next, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Digital Sphere Incorporated wasn't just any marketing data analytics company. When I joined 7 years ago, it was the industry's rising star, promising to revolutionize how businesses understand consumer behavior. Fresh out of my MBA program, with a dual specialization in marketing analytics and software development, I was their dream hire. For years, I truly believed I was living my dream job. My track record spoke for itself. Within my first year, I developed a customer segmentation model that boosted our clients' conversion rates by 37%. By year 3, my predictive purchasing algorithm became the backbone of our flagship product, Data Insight Pro. Last year alone, my innovations generated $43 million in new revenue. "Morgan, you're our secret weapon," Cameron would always say. Cameron Walsh, our head of product development, was one of the few genuine people at the company, along with Jenna Kim from legal and Derek Patterson from sales. They were my trusted circle in an increasingly political workplace. The warning signs were there, though I chose to ignore them. Audrey Bennett had been appointed CEO 2 years ago, coming from a competitor known for aggressive tactics. Initially, she publicly praised my work. "Morgan is the kind of talent that keeps Digital Sphere ahead of the curve," she told industry publications. But privately, things began to shift. The first time Audrey presented my algorithm optimization as our executive team's breakthrough at a board meeting, I brushed it off as typical corporate communication. When she started excluding me from strategy meetings about products I had developed, I told myself it was just to free up my time for innovation. When my name vanished from patent applications for technologies I created, I convinced myself it was standard intellectual property procedure. The annual Marketing Excellence Gala represented everything prestigious about our industry. Held at the Grand Meridian Hotel in downtown San Francisco, it gathered CEOs, innovators, and rising stars from every significant company in our field. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings above tables draped in white linen. The who's who of digital marketing sipped champagne and politely sized each other up. I'd spent weeks preparing for this night. Digital Sphere was nominated for Innovation of the Year for our consumer behavior prediction platform. My platform, though, you wouldn't know it from the nomination materials, which prominently featured Audrey's name and credentials. "You look tense," Jenna whispered to me earlier that evening. "Everything okay?" "Just the usual pre-presentation jitters," I lied, adjusting the sleeve of my navy blue dress. In truth, I'd been unsettled since accidentally finding out the executive team had a strategic planning retreat last weekend, one I should have been invited to as head of innovation. Jenna gave me a look that said she wasn't buying it. "Audrey's been meeting with the board a lot lately. Closed-door sessions. Probably just fiscal year planning," I suggested, though my stomach tightened. "Maybe," Jenna replied. "Just watch your back, Morgan. Things feel different lately." Across the room, Audrey was chatting animatedly with a young man I didn't recognize. He couldn't have been more than 25, but they were huddled together like conspirators, occasionally glancing in my direction. The history between Audrey and Nathan Reed was legendary in our industry. They'd started at the same company 15 years ago, before taking different paths. Nathan founded Tech Vantage with a philosophy of ethical innovation and employee ownership, while Audrey climbed through increasingly prestigious roles at competitor companies, known for delivering results at any cost. Their approaches couldn't be more different, and neither could their reputations. Nathan's employees stayed for decades. Audrey's burned out within years. What nobody knew, not even Audrey, was that I'd developed a new algorithm that would revolutionize consumer prediction accuracy. I called it the resonance model, and it combined psychological principles with behavioral economics and machine learning in a way nobody had successfully implemented before. It was still in beta on my secure development server, but initial tests showed it outperforming industry standards by 60%. I'd planned to present it to the executive team next month after perfecting it. That algorithm was my insurance policy, my value to the company, my ticket to the executive suite door, so I thought. As I stood near our table, watching the industry mingle, I had no idea how drastically my professional life was about to change. Or that my personal passion project would soon become the most valuable intellectual property in the industry. The moment is forever etched in my memory. I was explaining our attribution modeling to the CMO of a major retail chain when my phone vibrated in my clutch. Normally, I'd never check messages during such an important conversation, but we were expecting confirmation about our presentation slot, so I politely excused myself to glance at my screen. The message was indeed from Audrey, but it wasn't about the presentation. "You're fired. We need fresh blood. HR will contact you Monday with details. Do not access company systems after tonight." I read it 3 times, certain it was a mistake. My fingers went numb. The room seemed to tilt slightly as conversations around me continued, suddenly sounding distant and muffled. "Are you all right? You've gone pale," said the retail CMO, touching my arm lightly. "I'm fine," I managed, though my voice sounded strange, even to myself. "Would you excuse me for just a moment?" I scanned the room and found Audrey across the ballroom. She was laughing with the young man I'd noticed earlier, now joined by 2 board members. She glanced my way, saw me looking at my phone, and gave me the coldest smile I'd ever seen before, deliberately turning her back. 7 years. 7 years of missed birthdays and cancelled vacations. The Christmas I spent debugging a system crash, while my family opened presents without me. The relationship with Kevin that fell apart because I was married to my work. The 3 weekends per month I spent in the office while others enjoyed their lives. All sacrificed for Digital Sphere, for what I thought we were building together. "Morgan, what happened?" Jenna appeared at my side, concern etched on her face. I silently showed her the text. "She can't do this," Jenna whispered fiercely after reading it. "This violates so many protocols. No documentation, no performance improvement plan, no exit interview." "Apparently, she can," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded despite the earthquake happening inside me. "There's more," Jenna said, pulling me to a quiet corner. "I wasn't supposed to know this, but I overheard Audrey talking to legal yesterday. She's planning to claim your algorithm work as fully company-developed intellectual property. She's presenting it to the board as her strategic initiative." The betrayal cut deeper with this revelation. The resonance model wasn't just any project. It represented thousands of hours of my personal time, much of it worked on at home on my own equipment. While Digital Sphere owned the work I did on company time with company resources, significant portions of the model were developed independently. That's why she's doing this now, I realized aloud. The algorithm's almost ready for full implementation. She doesn't need me anymore, just my work. "Look at them," Jenna nodded subtly toward Audrey's group. The young man was now showing something on his tablet to the board members. "That's your replacement, Justin Bailey, fresh from Stanford. He's been shadowing different departments for 2 weeks. Audrey's been introducing him as a special consultant, but HR already has his executive paperwork processed. She planned this weeks ago," I said, the pieces falling into place. "Morgan," Jenna hesitated, "I shouldn't tell you this, but your termination paperwork is dated 3 weeks ago. It's been sitting in a folder on Patricia's desk in HR. They were just waiting for the right moment. 3 weeks ago was when I'd mentioned to Audrey that the resonance model was showing promising results. The timing couldn't be coincidental." Across the room, I saw Cameron enter the ballroom, looking around until he spotted me. The concern on his face told me he'd somehow heard as well. My phone began buzzing with messages from other colleagues. News traveled fast. "I need to see the exact termination documents," I said to Jenna, my mind shifting from emotional shock to analytical planning. "I can try to get copies," she offered. "No, don't risk your job," I said, "but tell me, did they include a non-compete clause modification?" "No," Jenna said after thinking for a moment. "Just standard separation documentation. Your original employment contract non-compete would still apply." This was significant. My original contract had a surprisingly narrow non-compete that only prohibited working on identical products to the ones I directly developed at Digital Sphere. Anything substantially different would be permissible. "What are you thinking?" Jenna asked, recognizing my strategic expression. "I'm thinking that Audrey just made the biggest mistake of her career," I replied. As I looked around the room at the gathered industry leaders, I realized I had knowledge that Audrey didn't. In her eagerness to claim my innovations, she had overlooked crucial details. She didn't know that I'd kept meticulous records of my independent work. She didn't know that I had personal backups of my development process. And most importantly, she didn't know that the resonance model she was so eager to claim was only half of the innovation. The other half, the implementation architecture that made it scalable, existed only in my mind and in encrypted files on my personal development system. Without me, they had an engine without a vehicle, powerful but ultimately useless. "Morgan," Jenna said quietly, "what are you going to do?" I took a deep breath and straightened my shoulders. "First, I'm going to get some air. Then, I'm going to figure out exactly how to respond to this professionally." As I walked toward the terrace doors, my path took me directly past the table where Nathan Reed sat with his executive team. And, as fate would have it, he looked up at exactly the right moment to see the expression on my face. The women's restroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel was designed for comfort and luxury, with a separate lounge area featuring velvet settees and soft lighting. I was grateful for this as I sank onto one of the couches, legs suddenly unable to support me as the full impact of what had happened began to hit. My hand shook as I placed my phone on the marble side table. The screen lit up with another notification, a calendar invite deletion for Monday's executive strategy meeting. They were already erasing me from the company. 7 years ago, Audrey had recruited me personally. I was finishing my MBA, presenting my thesis on predictive analytics and consumer behavior when she approached me afterward. "You're exactly what the industry needs," she told me, eyes alight with what I'd mistaken for shared passion. "Digital Sphere can give you the resources to develop these ideas at scale. We could change the marketing landscape together." I'd had other offers, good ones, from prestigious companies. But Audrey had painted a vision of innovation and growth that spoke to everything I wanted in my career. I'd believed her, trusted her. Now I sat alone in a bathroom while the industry celebrated outside, confronting the reality that I'd been nothing more than a resource to be used and discarded. The door opened, and I quickly tried to compose myself. A woman I didn't recognize gave me a sympathetic smile before disappearing into a stall. Was my distress that obvious? I caught my reflection in the mirror across the room. My carefully applied makeup remained intact, but my eyes held a wounded look that was impossible to hide. My phone buzzed again. A text from Cameron. "Just heard. This is insane. Are you okay? Where are you?" Then another from Derek. "Morgan, rumors flying around. Please tell me it's not true." And most surprisingly, one from Patricia in HR. "I'm so sorry. This wasn't handled properly. This wasn't my decision." I felt a wave of nausea as my body processed the stress. The physical symptoms of betrayal, constricted chest, churning stomach, lightheadedness, were overwhelming. I focused on my breathing, trying to center myself. Theodore Miller, Digital Sphere's legal counsel, pushed open the door to the women's restroom, looking around awkwardly before spotting me. "Theodore, this is the ladies' room," I said, momentarily distracted from my crisis. "I know. I'm sorry," he said, clearly uncomfortable. I needed to speak with you immediately." He sat beside me, lowering his voice. "Morgan, I've only just been informed about your termination. This wasn't processed through proper channels." "Meaning what, exactly?" I asked. "Meaning I'm uncomfortable with how this is being handled," he said carefully. "The company has exposure here. There are protocols for terminating executive-level employees, especially ones with your contributions." I studied his face. Theodore had always been meticulous about legal protections for the company. If he was concerned, it meant Audrey had overstepped significantly. "What's the company's legal position on my algorithms?" I asked directly. He hesitated. "That's complex. Work performed as an employee belongs to the company, but independent development on personal time using personal resources has different considerations." I finished for him. "Precisely," he nodded. "Morgan, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but there's an emergency board meeting scheduled for Monday morning. The agenda includes intellectual property security and strategic reorganization." The subtext was clear. They were moving to lock down everything I'd created and restructure my team before I could even clean out my desk. As Theodore left, I considered my immediate financial situation. I had savings that could carry me for 6 months if necessary. My condo, mortgage, and student loans were manageable but significant. I wasn't facing immediate financial ruin, but I needed a plan. I pulled up my non-compete agreement on my personal email, scanning the language with new attention. The restrictions were indeed narrowly defined. I couldn't work on substantially similar products, serving identical market functions for 1 year. But if I were to develop something different, something better, that would be permissible. Then I remembered my personal backup system. Every significant project I'd worked on had development logs and code snapshots stored on my encrypted home server. I'd maintained the system after a company-wide data loss 3 years ago nearly destroyed 6 months of work. It wasn't corporate espionage. Everything stored was properly documented in my work journals, as personal research and development exploration, but it meant I had records that could prove which aspects of my innovations were developed independently. The restroom door opened again, and this time Jenna entered. The presentation order changed. She said, "Audrey is accepting the innovation nomination in 15 minutes. She's telling everyone you had a family emergency and had to leave." A family emergency. Not even the dignity of the truth. I stood up, smoothing my dress. The initial shock was fading, replaced by something sharper, more focused. I'd given digital sphere everything: my time, my talent, my innovations. And in return, I'd been discarded without warning or acknowledgement. "I'm going back out there," I said. Jenna looked surprised. "Are you sure? No one would blame you for leaving." "I'm sure," I replied, reapplying my lipstick with steady hands. "I've earned my place in that room. Jenna, I'm not skulking away in disgrace for a situation I didn't create." As I walked back toward the ballroom, I wasn't the same person who had fled to the restroom 30 minutes earlier. That Morgan had been blindsided, hurt, betrayed. This Morgan was already calculating her next move. And as I pushed open the doors and stepped back into the gala, my eyes immediately found Nathan Reed, still seated at his table. But this time, when our gazes met, I didn't look away. I made my way back to my assigned table, where several industry colleagues were engaged in animated discussion. Their conversation hushed as I approached, confirming my suspicion that news of my firing had already circulated. With practiced poise from years of corporate politics, I smiled as if nothing were amiss and took my seat. Across the circular table sat Nathan Reed, CEO of Tech Vantage. At 45, Nathan had the distinguished look of someone who'd earned his success rather than inherited it. His company was Digital Sphere's biggest competitor, though they approached the market differently, focusing on ethical data use and long-term client relationships rather than aggressive growth and quarterly profits. "Morgan Taylor," he said, nodding in acknowledgement. "Your presentation on multi-channel attribution at last year's conference was brilliant. Changed how we approach several client problems." "Thank you," I replied, surprised by the specific compliment. I didn't realize competitors actually implemented each other's methodologies. A small smile played at his lips. "Good ideas transcend competition, though I doubt Audrey shares that philosophy." The mention of her name must have shown on my face, because Nathan's expression shifted to one of concern. "Is everything all right?" he asked quietly as the rest of the table became distracted by the announcement of the next award category. For a moment, I hesitated. Professional loyalty ran deep, even now. I'd never spoken ill of Digital Sphere to anyone in the industry, and part of me still instinctively protected the company I'd helped build. But loyalty should be reciprocal, and mine had been thoroughly betrayed. Making a decision, I subtly turned my phone so he could see the text message still displayed on my screen. Nathan's eyes widened slightly as he read it, then met mine with a look of genuine dismay. "During the gala by text?" he asked, keeping his voice low. I nodded. "That's..." He seemed to search for an appropriate word. "Inconcesionable." From anyone else, it might have sounded like performative sympathy, but something in Nathan's tone conveyed authentic indignation on my behalf. 7 years, I said simply. "I know," he replied. "I've followed your work since your thesis publication. Your predictive models changed the industry landscape." I was taken aback. "You read my thesis?" "Of course, behavioral pattern recognition in dynamic consumer environments. It's required reading for our analytics team." He paused, watching as Audrey made her way to the stage for the Innovation Award nomination. "Morgan, would you be willing to continue this conversation somewhere else after the ceremony? Perhaps coffee in the hotel lounge?" My instinct was to decline. Fraternizing with the competition immediately after being fired would look vindictive and unprofessional. But then I watched as Audrey accepted the nomination for my innovation, speaking passionately about our breakthrough technology without once mentioning my name. "Yes," I said decisively. "I'd like that." For the next 40 minutes, We sat through the remaining awards. I maintained a professional demeanor, applauding appropriately and engaging in necessary small talk, but I was acutely aware of Audrey watching me from across the room. Her expression shifting from surprise at my continued presence to visible concern as she noticed my conversation with Nathan. When the formal ceremony concluded, I excused myself from the table and made my way toward the hotel's mezzanine level, where a smaller, more private lounge offered a quiet space for conversation. Nathan joined me 5 minutes later. I ordered coffee, I said as he sat across from me in a secluded corner booth. Thank you. He settled into his seat, studying me with intelligent eyes. Morgan, I want to be transparent about why I asked to speak with you. This isn't just about Audrey's unprofessional behavior, though that would be reason enough for concern. I assumed as much, I replied. The industry has been tracking your innovations for years. Your consumer prediction models are consistently 2 steps ahead of everyone else's. He leaned forward slightly. But rumors have circulated that you've been developing something revolutionary. Something that makes current approaches obsolete. I kept my expression neutral, though internally I was surprised. I've been extremely careful about the resonance model development. What makes you think that? I asked. Because it's what I would be doing if I had your specific combination of expertise, he answered simply. And because Digital Sphere's client acquisition patterns changed 3 months ago. They've been targeting clients with complex multi-channel challenges that their current technology can't fully address. That suggests they're preparing to launch something new. His assessment was uncomfortably accurate. I'm in a complicated situation, Nathan, I said carefully. I have legal obligations to Digital Sphere, regardless of how they've treated me. Of course, I respect that completely. He reached into his jacket and placed a business card on the table. But if you determine that you have intellectual property that is legitimately yours, and if you're interested in a company that would value both your innovations and you as a person, TechVantage would be extremely interested in talking. I picked up the card, examining the embossed logo. What exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing that we explore possibilities, he said. No obligations, just a conversation about what could be possible while respecting all legal boundaries. From across the lounge, I noticed Audrey had entered with Justin, my apparent replacement, and several board members. Her eyes narrowed when she spotted me with Nathan. Your former boss doesn't look pleased, Nathan observed, following my gaze. Audrey believes in owning people, not just their work, I said. She considers this a betrayal. And yet she fired you by text during an industry event, he noted with a raised eyebrow. The irony isn't lost on me. Nathan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned slightly. I'm sorry, I need to take this. It's my daughter's school. As he stepped away to take the call, I found myself reflecting on Nathan's reputation in the industry. Unlike many CEOs, he was known for ethical business practices. TechVantage had never been involved in a data privacy scandal, never been sued by former employees, and maintained one of the highest retention rates in the tech sector. Their company motto, Technology with Humanity, wasn't just marketing. It informed their product development and business relationships. When Nathan returned, his expression was apologetic. I'm sorry, but I need to cut our evening short. My daughter broke her wrist at basketball practice. Of course, I said immediately. Family comes first. He smiled at that, a genuine smile. That reached his eyes. Exactly. Something Audrey never understood. He paused, then added, Morgan, I meant what I said about being interested in working with you. Take my private number. He wrote it on a napkin. When you've had time to think and consult with your attorney about your options, call me, day or night. As he prepared to leave, he hesitated. One last thing. Audrey has a history of claiming credit for others' work. She did it at Meridian, Tech before Digital Sphere. If you created something on your own time, with your own resources, protect it. Document everything. With that, he left, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a napkin that potentially represented my future. I was still sitting there 10 minutes later when Jenna found me. Morgan, you need to see this, she said, showing me her phone. On it was an internal company email sent from Audrey to the executive team and board members. Timestamped 20 minutes ago, due to concerns about intellectual property protection. Effective immediately, all access to development servers has been restricted to approved personnel only. Morgan Taylor's credentials have been revoked, and all her project files have been secured for company use. Tomorrow morning, we'll announce Justin Bailey as our new Chief Innovation Officer. Please direct all inquiries regarding Morgan's projects to Justin or myself. They weren't wasting any time. By Monday morning, they intended to have completely taken over my work and erased my contributions. This just became a legal issue, I said, pulling out my phone to call Riley Stevens, my law school friend who specialized in intellectual property. As I explained the situation to Riley, I watched Audrey across the room, smiling triumphantly with the board members. She thought she had one, that she could simply take what I had built and claim it as her own. But she had made a fundamental miscalculation. She thought the power lay in the company, in her position, in her access to resources. She didn't understand that true innovation can't be stolen or transferred like office equipment. And she certainly didn't understand what she had just unleashed. The hotel restaurant had emptied considerably as the gala attendees departed for after-parties or returned to their rooms. I sat at a corner table with my laptop open, waiting for Riley to arrive. After our phone call, she had immediately left her dinner to meet me, understanding the time-sensitive nature of the situation. "Morgan," Riley called as she hurried toward my table, her leather briefcase clutched in one hand. Riley Stevens and I had been friends since our undergraduate days. While I pursued technology and business, she specialized in intellectual property law, becoming one of San Francisco's most respected IP attorneys by age 35. "Thanks for coming so quickly," I said as she slid into the seat across from me. "Are you kidding? Text firing the person responsible for your company's most valuable innovations. This is the kind of case lawyers dream about." She set her briefcase on the table. "Now, tell me everything." For the next 30 minutes, I walked Riley through the entire situation, my history with Digital Sphere, the development of the resonance model, the circumstances of my termination, and my conversation with Nathan Reed. "Let's start with the legal boundaries," Riley said, opening her laptop. "I need to understand exactly what Digital Sphere legally owns versus what might be considered your independent intellectual property." I pulled up my employment contract and non-compete agreement, which I had forwarded to myself years ago as standard practice. "The language here is actually quite specific," Riley noted, scanning the documents. "Work performed using company resources, during company time, or directly related to assigned company projects belongs to Digital Sphere." But it doesn't include the broad, sweeping language most tech companies use to claim ownership of all intellectual output during your employment period. "That's because I negotiated that clause specifically before joining," I explained. "I was working on several academic papers at the time and didn't want to surrender those." "That foresight might save you now," Riley said. "Tell me about the development process for this resonance model." I described how the core algorithmic concepts had come to me during a weekend hiking trip in Muir Woods. Away from work, on my personal time, I had initially sketched the framework in my personal journals, developed the mathematical models at home on weekends, and only brought the concepts to work after establishing the foundational architecture. "And you can prove this development timeline?" Riley asked. "Absolutely," I confirmed. "I maintain encrypted development logs with timestamps on my personal server. I also have dated notebook entries and email correspondence with academic colleagues, discussing theoretical aspects of the approach without revealing proprietary details." Riley's expression brightened. "That's excellent. Now, what about patents?" "That's where it gets interesting," I replied. Audrey never prioritized patenting the underlying methodology. She was more concerned with getting the product to market quickly. There are patents on specific implementations, but not on the core, theoretical approach that makes it revolutionary. "And have you implemented the full model on Digital Sphere systems?" "No," I said, and couldn't help smiling slightly. What's in their system is essentially version 1.0, functional, but missing key components. The complete implementation architecture exists only in my personal development environment. Without it, they have an engine without a transmission." Riley sat back, looking thoughtful. "Okay, here's my initial assessment. Based on your contract language and development process, you have a strong claim to the fundamental intellectual property of the resonance model. Digital Sphere owns the specific implementation you developed on their time and systems, but not necessarily the core concept or the enhanced implementation you developed independently." "What about my non-compete?" I asked. "It's narrower than most," she observed, reviewing the language again. "It prevents you from working on substantially similar products serving identical market functions for 12 months. If you were to develop something that approaches the same problems from a fundamentally different angle or serves different market functions, you'd be in the clear. A plan was beginning to take shape in my mind. So, if I were to build something that makes their approach obsolete, rather than competing directly with it, that would likely fall outside the non-compete restrictions, Riley confirmed. But Morgan, we need to be extremely careful here. One misstep and you could face significant legal challenges. My phone chimed with a text message. It was Nathan, back from the hospital. Emily has a minor fracture. We'll be fine. I've been thinking about your situation. If you're still up, I'd like to continue our conversation. My team is gathering at our headquarters to prepare for Monday's quarterly planning. You're welcome to join if you've had legal counsel and feel comfortable doing so. I showed the message to Riley. This is moving fast, she noted. Are you sure you want to pursue this route? I'm not sure of anything right now, I admitted, but I know I can't let Audrey take credit for my life's work and push me aside. Riley nodded. If you decide to meet with TechVantage, I'm coming with you. We'll establish ground rules that protect you legally before any substantive discussions occur. 2 hours later, Riley and I walked into TechVantage headquarters in South Park. Unlike Digital Sphere's sleek, imposing glass tower downtown, TechVantage occupied a renovated industrial building with exposed brick walls and open workspaces. Even at this late hour, several areas were occupied by engineers and designers. Nathan met us in the lobby, now dressed more casually in jeans and a button-down shirt. Morgan, thank you for coming, and you must be Riley Stevens. Your reputation precedes you. As does yours, Mr. Reed, Riley replied professionally. Please, it's Nathan, and I understand your presence here. Morgan's legal protection is paramount. He led us to a conference room where 3 people were already seated. This is Alicia Ramirez, our Chief Technology Officer, Marcus Wang, Head of Product, and Samantha Levine, our legal counsel. After introductions, Samantha addressed Riley directly to establish clear boundaries for this discussion. We've prepared a mutual non-disclosure agreement that explicitly states any intellectual property disclosed by Morgan remains her sole property unless specific licensing or purchase agreements are later executed. It also prevents TechVantage from using any concepts discussed for a period of 5 years without Morgan's written consent. Riley reviewed the document carefully. This is actually more protective than what I would have requested, she remarked, visibly impressed. Morgan, I'm comfortable with you proceeding under these terms. Once the agreements were signed, Nathan turned to me. Morgan, the floor is yours. Tell us what you envision. For the next hour, I outlined my vision, not the specific technical details of the resonance model, but the conceptual framework and the problems it could solve. I explained how current consumer prediction models, including those used by both Digital Sphere and TechVantage, relied on behavioral patterns that were becoming less reliable in an increasingly fragmented digital landscape. The future isn't in better prediction of existing patterns, I concluded. It's in understanding the underlying motivational resonance that drives consumer behavior across all channels and contexts. The room was silent for a moment after I finished. That's revolutionary, Alicia said finally. You're essentially proposing we stop trying to predict what consumers will do based on what they've done before, and instead understand why they make decisions in the first place. Exactly, I confirmed. And I've developed a mathematical model that can identify these motivational patterns with significantly higher accuracy than current approaches. Nathan leaned forward. And this is what Digital Sphere is trying to claim. They have pieces of it, I clarified, but the complete framework and implementation architecture remain mine. Marcus, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up. If this works as you describe it, it wouldn't just compete with Digital Sphere's products, it would make them obsolete. Yes, I said simply. Their approach would suddenly look like trying to predict weather patterns by looking at cloud shapes while we're using atmospheric physics. Nathan exchanged glances with his team before addressing me directly. Morgan, I want to be completely transparent about what I'm thinking. We would like to offer you a position as Chief Innovation Officer at TechVantage. With full credit for your work, competitive compensation, and an equity stake in the company. I hadn't expected such a direct offer. That's very generous. It's not generosity, it's recognition of value, Nathan corrected. But more importantly, we want to offer you something Digital Sphere never did. True partnership in bringing your vision to life. We would need to move quickly, Alicia noted. If what you're saying about Digital Sphere's plans is accurate, They'll be announcing their version of your work soon. Riley raised a hand. Before we discuss implementation timelines, we need to establish clear documentation of Morgan's independent development to protect her legally. Absolutely, Samantha agreed. We should create a detailed development timeline with supporting evidence. As the conversation continued into the early morning hours, a plan took shape. Tech Vantage would announce my joining their executive team on Monday morning, just as Digital Sphere was planning to announce my replacement. We would simultaneously reveal the development of a new approach to consumer analytics, not the complete resonance model yet, but enough to signal to the market that something revolutionary was coming. By 3 a.m., we had established the framework for both my employment agreement and the product development roadmap. What would normally take weeks of negotiation had been accomplished in hours, driven by mutual respect and shared vision. As Riley and I prepared to leave, Nathan walked us to the elevator. Morgan, I know this is moving incredibly fast, and I want you to take the weekend to think about it. This is a major life decision. I appreciate that, I said, but sometimes clarity comes in moments of crisis. I've spent years trying to build something meaningful at Digital Sphere, always believing that eventually my contributions would be properly valued. Tonight showed me they never will be. Their loss is our gain, Nathan said simply. But whatever you decide, the offer stands. As Riley and I rode down in the elevator, she gave me a sidelong glance. You know, in 15 years of legal practice, I've never seen a CEO offer an executive position, equity, and creative control to someone they just met. We didn't just meet, I corrected her. He's been following my work for years, and honestly, I've admired Tech Vantage's approach from afar as well. Still, Riley said, it's remarkable how quickly this has come together. Almost like I was meant to be. I finished for her. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best opportunities. As we stepped out into the cool San Francisco night, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger or vindication, but excitement. For the first time in years, I was truly free to create without constraints. With a team that valued both my innovations and me as a person. Audrey had intended to destroy my career. Instead, she might have just catapulted it to heights I never imagined possible. Saturday morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. After 4 hours of sleep, I woke energized rather than exhausted. The decision had crystallized. Overnight, I would accept Nathan's offer and help build something that would transform the industry. By 9 a.m., I was back at Tech Vantage headquarters. This time with my personal laptop and external drives containing my development logs and code repositories. Nathan had assembled a core team of engineers and data scientists, all of whom had signed additional confidentiality agreements specific to the resonance model. Before we begin, I said to the assembled team, I want to clarify something important. What we're building isn't just an improvement on existing systems. It's a fundamental paradigm shift in how we understand consumer behavior. If we succeed, we won't just compete with Digital Sphere, we'll make their entire approach obsolete. Alicia, Tech Vantage's CTO, nodded. That's exactly why we're all here on a weekend. This isn't just about business competition, it's about advancing the field. For the next several hours, I walked the team through the theoretical framework of the resonance model. I explained how traditional prediction models relied on historical patterns that became increasingly unreliable as consumer behavior fragmented across channels and devices. The resonance model, instead, identified the underlying motivational triggers that remained consistent regardless of context. The key innovation, I explained, pointing to a complex mathematical formula on the whiteboard, is this multidimensional resonance function that weights motivational factors dynamically based on contextual variables. It's why the model can achieve 60% better prediction accuracy with 30% less data. Marcus let out a low whistle. That's not incremental improvement, that's revolutionary. And this is what Digital Sphere doesn't have. Asked Rachel, the lead data scientist. They have an early implementation of the core algorithm, I clarified, but without the contextual weighting framework and adaptive learning components. It's like having a Ferrari engine installed in a go-kart. By midday, we had divided into working groups. One team focused on integrating the core algorithm with Tech Vantage's existing data infrastructure. Another began developing the user interface that would make the complex system accessible to clients. A third team, led by Alicia and me, worked on implementing the advanced components that would truly differentiate our product. The energy in the room was electric. Ideas flowed freely, Challenges were identified and solved collaboratively. And progress happened at a pace I'd never experienced at Digital Sphere. There was none of the political positioning or credit grabbing that had become the norm under Audrey's leadership. At 3 p.m., Nathan brought in lunch for everyone, not the standard pizza, typical of weekend work sessions, but a catered spread from one of San Francisco's best restaurants. Fuel for innovation, he explained with a smile, and a small token of appreciation for everyone giving up their weekend. As we ate, my phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. Chaos at DS. Audrey trying to access your secure development server. Nobody can find documentation for full implementation. Emergency board call happening now. You okay? I showed the message to Nathan. They're realizing what they've lost, he observed. How long before they can replicate your work without the full implementation architecture? Months, maybe longer, I replied. They have pieces of the puzzle, but not the complete picture. And every attempt they make to reverse engineer it will take them further down the wrong path because the visible components are designed to work with infrastructure they don't have. By Saturday evening, we had a functioning prototype that demonstrated the core capabilities of the Resonance model, integrated with TechVantage's existing platform. It wasn't the complete system yet, but it was enough to prove the concept and demonstrate the potential. This is remarkable progress, Nathan said as we reviewed the day's work. At this rate, we could have a market-ready version within weeks, not months. There's something else we should consider, I suggested. A preview for select clients to demonstrate the difference between our approach and traditional methods. A side-by-side comparison. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. That would make the advantages immediately clear. As Saturday turned into Sunday, our progress accelerated. The team had grown as word spread through TechVantage about the weekend project. Engineers, designers, and data scientists volunteered their time, excited to be part of something potentially Sunday evening brought another text from Jenna. Justin melting down. Can't make sense of your systems. Audrey told board full implementation would be ready by Monday's announcement. They're scrambling to create something presentable. Also, rumors that you've been seen at TechVantage. Audrey is furious. I couldn't help but smile. Audrey had assumed she could simply replace me and take credit for my work. She was discovering the hard way that innovation isn't a commodity to be transferred or stolen. By midnight Sunday, we had achieved what would normally take months. The core Resonance model was fully integrated with TechVantage's platform, with a user interface that made its powerful capabilities accessible to non-technical users. We had also prepared a market announcement of my joining TechVantage as Chief Innovation Officer and the upcoming launch of our revolutionary approach to consumer analytics. There's one more thing we need to decide, Nathan said as we gathered for a final review. Timing. Digital Sphere is planning to announce their version of your work tomorrow morning, along with your replacement. Do we preempt them or respond? Preempt, I said without hesitation. 7 a.m. press release, before the markets open. By the time Audrey makes her announcement, it will already be old news. Nathan nodded. I agree, let's make it happen. As we finalized the announcement, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Morgan, it's Audrey. Her voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. I believe you said everything you needed to say in your text message Friday night, I replied coolly. That was unfortunate timing, she said, clearly choosing her words carefully. The board and I have reconsidered. We'd like to offer you a revised position, Executive Vice President of Innovation, with a significant compensation increase. I almost laughed. Audrey, we both know why you're calling. You've discovered you can't implement the Resonance model without me. There was a pause. We're prepared to acknowledge your contributions more explicitly, she said, ignoring my assertion. Full credit on the patents, a public recognition of your role. It's too late, I interrupted. You didn't value what you had until you lost it. That's not a foundation for a working relationship. Don't be hasty, Morgan. Her voice hardened. Your non-compete agreement has been thoroughly reviewed by legal counsel and poses no barrier to my future plans. I finished for her. Goodbye, Audrey. As I ended the call, I looked up to find the entire TechVantage team watching me. Nathan raised an eyebrow questioningly. Digital Sphere just offered me a promotion, I explained with a wry smile. Apparently, I'm suddenly valuable again. Too little too late, Alicia commented. Much too late, I agreed. At precisely 7 a.m. Monday morning, TechVantage issued a press release announcing my appointment as Chief Innovation Officer and previewing our revolutionary new approach to consumer analytics. The release included quotes from several industry analysts who had been privately briefed over the weekend, all expressing excitement about the paradigm shift the new technology represented. By 7:30 a.m., my phone was flooded with messages from colleagues, former clients, and industry contacts. By 8 a.m., financial news networks were reporting on the announcement, speculating about what it meant for digital sphere and the broader industry. At 9:30 a.m., when the markets opened, TechVantage stock jumped 12%. Digital spheres fell 8% initially, then continued a steady decline as investors processed the implications. At 10 a.m., Digital Sphere issued their planned press release, announcing Justin Bailey as their new Chief Innovation Officer and previewing their revolutionary consumer prediction technology, but the announcement fell flat, overshadowed by TechVantage's earlier news and lacking the specific capabilities that would have made it truly innovative. By noon, I had received messages from over a dozen former colleagues at Digital Sphere, ranging from congratulations to inquiries about potential positions at TechVantage. Cameron's message was particularly satisfying. Audrey is having a complete meltdown. Board emergency session. Heard your name mentioned approximately 57 times, none positively. Proud of you. At 2 p.m., Nathan called an all-hands meeting to formally introduce me to the entire company. The auditorium was packed with employees eager to hear about the new direction. Today marks a new chapter for TechVantage, Nathan began. With Morgan Taylor joining our executive team, we're not just adding exceptional talent, we're embracing a vision that will transform our industry. I want everyone to understand something important. What we announced today isn't just a new product or feature. It's a fundamental reimagining of how we understand consumer behavior. When I took the stage, looking out at hundreds of faces filled with excitement and curiosity, I felt a surge of emotion. This was what leadership should feel like. Inspiring others with a vision, not manipulating them for personal gain. Thank you for the warm welcome. I began. 3 days ago, I thought my career had hit a devastating setback. Today, I realized it was actually the opportunity I'd been waiting for. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best beginnings. As I outlined my vision for the future of consumer analytics and how the resonance model would transform the industry, I could feel the energy in the room building. These weren't just employees listening to a new executive, they were collaborators, excited about creating something revolutionary together. By the end of the day, the industry landscape had dramatically shifted. TechVantage was being hailed as the new innovation leader, while Digital Sphere faced serious questions about their technology roadmap and executive leadership. As Nathan and I reviewed the day's events in his office, my phone buzzed with another message from Cameron. Board has called for review of Audrey's leadership. Stock down 15% at closing. Multiple clients already requesting meetings with TechVantage. Justin offering to resign. Not a great Monday for Digital Sphere. It appears your former employer is having a difficult day, Nathan observed as I showed him the message. They made their choice, I replied, feeling not vindication but a strange sense of closure. Now they're living with the consequences. And how are you feeling about your choice? He asked. I looked around at the office, at the whiteboard filled with innovative ideas, at the team still working enthusiastically despite the late hour. Like I finally found where I belong, I answered truthfully. In just 72 hours, I had gone from being fired by text message to helping reshape the industry landscape. Audrey had intended to erase me and claim my innovations as her own. Instead, she had inadvertently set in motion a chain of events that would transform not just my career, but the entire industry. By Monday night, Digital Sphere's flagship product, the one they had built their reputation on, was on the verge of obsolescence, and I was just getting started. 6 months passed in what felt like both an instant and a lifetime, standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new corner office at TechVantage headquarters. I watched the San Francisco fog roll in as evening approached. The view was different from my old office at Digital Sphere, less towering skyscrapers, more of the bay and the bridge. But the change mirrored my professional transformation. The door opened and Jenna entered with a tablet in hand. After 3 months at Digital Sphere post my departure, she had finally accepted my standing offer to join TechVantage as general counsel. The final numbers are in, she announced, handing me the tablet. The Resonance platform generated $87. million in new revenue this quarter alone. That's triple the projections. I scrolled through the report, taking in the metrics that validated everything we'd worked for. Client acquisition rate up 120%. Retention rate at 98%. Implementation success rate at 95%, unheard of in our industry. And digital sphere. I couldn't help asking. Jenna's expression was a mixture of satisfaction and professional restraint. The acquisition was finalized yesterday. TechVantage bought them for 22% of their valuation from last year. Most of the purchase price was for their client list, not their technology. The news should have felt like vindication, but instead, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Digital Sphere had been my professional home for 7 years. I had built relationships there, created innovations I was proud of, invested my heart and mind in its success. Seeing it diminished and absorbed into a larger entity wasn't the victory I might have imagined 6 months ago. "Have you heard from Audrey?" I asked. "She resigned 3 months ago after the second consecutive quarter of declining revenue," Jenna replied. "Last I heard, she was consulting." A knock at the door interrupted our conversation. Cameron and Derek entered, both now heading departments at TechVantage. Cameron had joined 2 months after me, bringing his product expertise and genuine leadership style. Derek had followed a month later, along with several other talented colleagues who had watched Digital Sphere's decline with growing concern. "Ready for the executive dinner?" Cameron asked. "Nathan's bringing the entire board to celebrate the quarterly results." "Almost," I replied. "Just need a few minutes to finish up here." After they left, I turned back to the window, reflecting on the whirlwind journey of the past 6 months. The Resonance platform had launched officially 3 months after my joining TechVantage, following an intensive development period that had brought out the best in everyone involved. Unlike traditional product launches with grandiose promises and minimal delivery, we had taken a different approach. Understated announcements followed by extraordinary results for our initial clients. Word had spread rapidly. Companies that had been loyal to Digital Sphere for years began requesting demonstrations. Industry analysts published glowing assessments of our revolutionary approach. The stock market responded accordingly, with TechVantage's value nearly doubling while Digital Sphere's steadily declined. But the professional success, while gratifying, wasn't what brought me the most satisfaction. It was the transformation in how I approached my work and leadership. At Digital Sphere, under Audrey's influence, I had gradually adopted a protective stance around my innovations, fearful they would be claimed by others. I had become secretive, strategic, always calculating how to ensure my contributions would be recognized. It had been exhausting and ultimately futile. At TechVantage, with proper credit and recognition built into the company culture, I found myself free to collaborate openly, to share ideas generously, to celebrate others' contributions as enthusiastically as my own. The result was innovation that exceeded even my expectations. Nathan had been true to his word in every respect. My role as Chief Innovation Officer came with both the authority and resources to implement my vision. My contributions were publicly acknowledged and properly compensated. Most importantly, I was treated as a valued partner in the company's future, not as a resource to be exploited and discarded. In response, I had helped establish a new corporate ethics policy that formalized these principles, ensuring that every innovator at TechVantage received proper credit and compensation for their contributions. We had also created an innovation incubator program that allowed employees to develop their own ideas with company support, maintaining ownership and receiving equity in any resulting products. The contrast with Audrey's approach couldn't have been more stark. Where she had seen people as tools to achieve her ambitions, Nathan understood that genuine leadership meant empowering others to achieve their potential. The results spoke for themselves, not just in financial terms, but in the culture of enthusiasm and collaboration that permeated the company. My personal healing had come gradually. The betrayal had cut deep, challenging not just my career but my self-worth and professional identity. For weeks, I had experienced anger, doubt, and anxiety about the future. But with each successful milestone at TechVantage, with each instance of proper recognition and mutual respect, the wounds had slowly mended. Now, 6 months later, I could look back at that Friday night text message with something approaching gratitude. It had been the catalyst that freed me from a toxic environment and opened the door to something far better than I had imagined possible. A notification on my phone reminded me of the time. The executive dinner would be starting soon, and as Chief Innovation Officer, my presence was expected. But before leaving, I took a moment to send an email I had been contemplating for days. The recipient was Justin Bailey, my replacement at Digital Sphere, who had resigned after 3 frustrating months trying to fill my shoes. According to industry gossip, he had been set up to fail. Given impossible expectations with insufficient resources and support a familiar pattern under Audrey's leadership. The message was simple, an invitation to meet for coffee and discuss potential opportunities at Tech Vantage, not out of revenge or to further deplete Digital Sphere's talent pool, but because talented individuals deserved better than to be sacrificed on the altar of corporate politics. As I gathered my things to leave, I glanced at the framed article. On my wall, a feature in Technology Innovator magazine with the headline Morgan Taylor, How Betrayal Launched a Revolution in Consumer Analytics. The interview had been one of many in recent months as industry publications sought to understand the dramatic shift in the competitive landscape. The final paragraph of the article had captured the essence of what I had learned. Sometimes the worst professional betrayals become the greatest catalysts for growth. Taylor's experience demonstrates that true innovation cannot be stolen or suppressed, and that the companies who respect and value their talent will ultimately prevail over those who exploit it. At the executive dinner that evening, surrounded by colleagues who had become friends and leaders who had become allies, Nathan raised a toast to our shared success, but his words were directed specifically to me. To Morgan, he said, who reminded us all that true innovation isn't just about technology or algorithms. It's about human creativity, integrity, and courage. Your journey has transformed not just our company, but our entire industry's understanding of how to nurture and respect talent. We're grateful not just for what you've created, but for how you've inspired us to become better versions of ourselves. As glasses clinked around the table, I felt a sense of completion. The betrayal that had seemed so devastating 6 months ago had become the foundation for something far greater than I could have built had I remained at Digital Sphere. In the year that followed, we launched the Women in Technology Mentorship Program, providing guidance and support to female innovators facing challenges similar to what I had experienced. The program quickly became one of the most respected in the industry, with over 500 participants in its first year. At the next annual Marketing Excellence Gala, the very event where I had received that fateful text message, I found myself on stage accepting the Innovation Leadership Award, the industry's highest honor. Looking out at the audience, I spotted a few former Digital Sphere executives. Their expressions a mixture of regret and resignation. My acceptance speech was brief but meaningful. A year ago, I learned a painful but invaluable lesson. Your worth isn't determined by how others value you, but by how you value yourself. True innovation comes not from fear of losing credit, but from the freedom to collaborate with integrity and purpose. To anyone facing betrayal or undervaluation, remember this: sometimes the door closing behind you is actually the universe pointing you toward the path you were meant to take all along. As I concluded my speech to enthusiastic applause, I realized that the professional betrayal that had seemed so devastating had actually been the greatest gift of my career. It had forced me to leave a situation where I was undervalued, propelled me into an environment where I could truly thrive, and taught me lessons about leadership and self-worth that I would carry forever. The text that was meant to end my career had instead launched it to heights I never imagined possible, and for that, ironically, I had Audrey to thank. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to something better? Share your story in the comments below, and if you found value in my journey from betrayal to triumph, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories like this, and share with someone who might need this message of hope and resilience today. Remember, sometimes what feels like your worst professional moment can become the catalyst for your greatest success. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to recognize your true worth, no matter what challenges you face.